Tension on deck.
Hey, Ron. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, and welcome to everybody to our special 9/11 Remembrance edition of the Executive Perspective, where today Rob and I will be remembering our experiences on the events of the attack on the nation on September 11th, 2001. Tomorrow marks the 24th anniversary, and we have promised to never forget. And so Rob and I will not forget, and we will have a special edition today. We're going to talk about our personal experiences on 9/11, what we were doing, what our response was, and then what our duties and our responses were uh, basically down at ground zero for the months that followed. So obviously, just before we went on the air, it's already in the chat. Uh, Charlie Kirk was speaking at a college in Utah this afternoon. Charlie Kirk is a conservative speaker. He speaks at a lot of colleges. He's the CEO of Turning Point USA, someone who has given a voice to anyone and will always allow even his biggest critics an opportunity. I've seen it so many times where someone's just will throw out a nasty comment and he's like, wait, don't go away. Give that person a microphone. Let them say their piece. And then he'll have a dialogue with them. And there are some horrific video that's circulating. We're not going to show any video of the incident. It was a devastating shot in the neck. And just before we went on the air, President Donald Trump put out on his Truth Social a statement. The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me, and now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you. So before we got into the show, I think we just felt it was important. It's national news to bring that up. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, when you listen to Charlie Kirk, my wife's been listening to him for years, and he's such an extremely intelligent man, and is able to engage in conversation, like you just said, when even there's somebody is adversarial to him. He's able to listen, and he responds appropriately, and he responds with facts rather than speculation or anything else. Extremely smart individual. Very sad to see that, again, political violence. I mean, we saw during the campaign for the presidency, Donald Trump getting shot. I mean, for because of his political views and what he was going to do, and now we see Charlie Kirk getting shot because of what he was trying to do, where he was trying to reform most of the people that are in colleges and are told or brought into this type of atmosphere where liberalism and things are not right in this country and everything else, when a lot of things are right in this country. So I think Charlie Kirk was able to give a different side and explain things that are being done to the people, especially in school, college kids that maybe don't get that side of it, don't understand it, and on my heart, and I'm sure your heart goes out to his family, his wife, and his children. I understand. I think TC mentioned that his daughter may have been right there by his side when that happened. I mean, that's an horrific event for her, and I hope it's not. But my thought and prayers go out to the family, and I hope that this political violence stops. I mean, it's uncalled for. This is not a third world country. This is the United States of America, and freedom of speech is one of our most sacred rights. So why we try to silence it by violence? It's horrific.
Right. Whether conservative or liberal, whatever your views are, you have the right to express those views. this is a First Amendment platform here. So we never silence anyone's views in the chat, in the conversation. We oppose one another in our views and give our perspectives. And he always gave, like you said, everyone the voice, anyone the voice to speak and to give their opinion. And then he would counter it with his opinion and speak a lot of facts. And whether you agree with him or not, he was a polarizing voice.
Yeah.
And you know, they had somebody in custody. Early reports was that was a shooter from 200 yards away. Now that campus police are saying that he's not the shooter. So early reports, we don't know what's going on. But we weren't going to discuss any other topics today. We were going to stick to just the remembrance of 9/11. We think that's very important. But yeah, so just rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, and prayers to his family, to his friends, his loved ones. And we don't advocate violence on either side. And it's crazy where the world has gone. And there's not a lot of words for it,
No.
It's just.
No, it's crazy. You know what I mentioned to my wife earlier? I said, why didn't they have bulletproof glass around him and stuff? And she's like, yeah, you could have, but what he presented was the ability to be one and
Yeah.
talk like he's going to have a regular conversation with you. And unfortunately, the perpetrator, who's not in custody at this time, was took advantage of that. It's very sad that you now have to, continually put yourselves, whether behind glass, bulletproof glass, or in a venue where you can screen everybody. It's sad that you have to do that. That's not the way this country is set up, and that's not what Charlie Kirk stood for. And you can see that, he's a patriot. That's what he is. He's definitely a patriot.
Absolutely. So, all right. Rough way to get the show started. It's a somber time of year for me. Every year, I do get a little emotional remembering that day and the events and all that followed. So I was a sergeant on 9/11. I was waiting to get promoted to lieutenant. I know you were a lieutenant up in the Bronx, right?
Yep.
You want to go through your day?
Either way, whatever you want to do first.
We didn't discuss it.
I can. Well, I was a lieutenant in the borough. I was the admin lieutenant for the borough at that point. A position I didn't ask for, but I was told by my good friend Chief Jaffe that this was the spot I was going to take. So I took it. I was actually studying for my master's degree, and I had come in early that day because on Tuesdays I normally came in early because I went to class at the end of the day. So I came in. I was in at 7 o'clock that morning, and I'm literally listening to the radio. 1010 Wins News, right? Everybody listened to that back in the old days, and they said a small plane had crashed into the one of the twin towers. So I was like, all right, that's it happens. I mean, we there's been aviation incidences throughout the city, so didn't think much of it. Monitored it a little bit or whatever. And then obviously when the second plane hit, I mean, everybody tells you, right? Everybody that you speak to says once the second plane hit, it was no longer an accident. You knew we were under attack. We knew it was. That's exactly right. TC's got it right. I was a forced house mouse, and I was in there, and then all of a sudden now now the actions start, right? Now it's like I got to send people down there, 1 and 8 in every command. I remember calling the 4-5, and the desk sergeant's like, I don't have 1 and 8. I said, I don't care if you have to take, get everybody that's in the house right now, whatever. I don't care. Send 1 and 8. I'm asking for 1 and 8. I don't care. And I sent people down there, and I didn't go down the first day, but obviously I don't even remember going home that night. I think I may have slept for an hour at the borough and got back up in the next morning. But just sending people down there and thinking about it later on is like that was a hard thing to do in itself, because I'm sending people in harm's way, So and then we actually hearing on the radio, and then the collapse of the first tower, the collapse of the second tower, and then there was numerous rumors that most of the upper echelons of the NYPD were killed, and then started that major recovery, so and rescue operation. So that was the first day. It was a long day. Um, Timlin was the borough commander. Izzo was the XO. Timlin went right down. Not like we hear about other borough commanders that they go home. But that's another story for another day. But Timlin went right down. Operations calls me and says, "Hey, make sure that the XO stays at the borough to run the borough." I said, "Okay." Izzo came in. I go, "Hey, Chief, I know it's crazy. This is what I did. I got 1 and 8 from every command going down. I got this, that. And I go, the operations is telling me that, you should stay here and run the borough." He says, "Okay, got it." So he goes in his office. He comes out in his full uniform, his gun belt. I go, "Chief, where are you going?" He goes, "I'm going down." I said, "Okay, man, hey." So I mean, at that point, I was running the borough. I didn't know if I ran it right or whatever, but that was that day. That was a very chaotic day, and like I said, we stayed forever. So that was my first day.
Yeah. I was working midnights. I was a sergeant in the 7-8 precinct. I was working midnights. I had Sunday, Monday RDO. So Monday night for Tuesday was my first day back. So I had gone admin sick Thursday and Friday, my last two the week before, because I had a small surgical procedure. I didn't want to go out sick. I was waiting to get promoted to lieutenant. I was going to the next class. They were saying it was going to go in any day. And so I just went admin sick, what you're not supposed to do, for surgeries or anything like that. But I just went admin sick for 2 days, had my 2 days RDO, went back in, told the guys, "Hey, listen, I'm going to take the desk because, I got some stitches." And so I took the desk. So at the end of the tour, I go end the tour, and I'm on the Gowanus Expressway, and I'm listening, like you said, listening to the radio, and you're hearing about the plane, and you could see from where I'm traveling, you can see the smoke. Like, wow, it's a lot of fire for a little plane, And as I'm on the Gowanus, just before 2nd Avenue, you see the second plane coming across, because it came back from, like, it circled around from Jersey, and you see it low, and I'm like, what the hell? Then you hear on the radio, I didn't see the impact. You hear the radio, and they're like, "Oh my God, another plane just hit." And like you said, as soon as that happened, I got off the exit at 2nd Avenue and went right back to work. I called my wife up. We still had cell service at the time, right? I called my wife at the time, and I says, "I'm going back. I'm not, obviously I'm not coming home. This is a big deal. We're under attack." So I go back to the 7-8. I walk through the front door. The CO sees me. He goes, "Ron, don't even change. Get on the phone. Start calling everybody in." Now, a lot of things went wrong that day, and that was one of them on the job's end. Is we called everybody in.
Yeah, all right. I
We
can see
didn't set
that.
ourselves up the way the
Right.
patrol guide is set up.
Yeah.
you you're supposed to call in, the next platoon, save the platoon after that for relief. And, you know, I don't think it would ever happen again because how bad that worked out. Because it was recalled of everybody. It was on the radio. All firefighters, all police officers report to your command. If you can't get to your command, we report it to the boroughs. You know, if you lived on Staten Island, you went to the 122 to the borough, or just go to your local precinct and sign in. You know,
Right, you never thought you'd use that little blue mobilization card that they gave you in the academy.
I don't even know if. Well, you know what? You laugh. We probably did have it in our wallet because back
Right.
then,
Gotta
FIAU or
carry
somebody
it.
would ask you. Let me say it. When they want to
Yeah.
catch you, and they want to get you an
Yeah.
easy one. Let me see a mobilization card. Like, what are we in the academy again? But yeah. So we started calling everybody in. So as they're coming in, I had a stack of rosters, like you said. You're sending 1 and 8. So
Yeah.
our borough said, you got to send 1 and 8, 1 and 8. So I took 1 and 8 from the day tour. It was Sergeant Eddie Marengo and 8 cops. I put them on the roster. Godspeed, and they started heading down. Everybody else is coming in. We're just rostering them up and basically standing by, as they're coming in. You read about it. As TC is saying, this was new territory, all hands,
Sure.
mistakes were inevitable, like setting up a command in the lobby of one of the towers. Just ask FD.
Yeah.
So I'm rostering everybody up and getting everybody to stand by and see what we're going to do. And then basically it's like, all right, we did everything we could do. We spoke to everybody we could speak to. We called everybody in. And then it's just like watch TV. You're watching the TV and you're watching what's going on. And you're seeing the horrific things that are going on. And then, the first tower goes down. And we're like, oh my God, how many thousands of people just died? It's your initial thought. Were we able to get anybody out of that building? You start having those thoughts. And then you have the other thoughts, just like you had mentioned. Did I just send Eddie and 8 people down to their demise? Did that building just fall on them? And by the grace of God, they got caught in traffic in that the little tunnel that goes from.
Oh, like the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel extension there? That little
Yeah, it wraps around from the FDR over to West Street. And it's where you lose all your signal and everything else on your phone. Even your radio goes out. So when the tower went down, they were there. They wound up abandoning the van. So they were, like everybody else, covered from head to toe.
Oh, yeah.
And, but we didn't know because you couldn't contact anybody. You're listening to the radio transmissions, like you said. Just for full disclosure, we have the radio transmissions. We're not going to play them. We decided that we're not going to play them. We are going to show some photos in a little while of work down at Ground Zero, what we call the pile. So we have about a 7-minute show of pictures that we're going to show a little later. We discussed, what did we want to show? I mean, everybody sees on TV, the towers being hit, the towers going down, the towers on fire, the horrific tragedy of people either falling or leaping because they had no other choice at that point. There was such horror that they were trapped in. And we didn't want to show any of that. We have the pictures from aviation. We didn't want to show that. So we felt that seeing what we're going to discuss our time down, working in the rescue and recovery of Ground Zero on the pile. And these are pictures that I compiled back in 2001, and I actually had on a CD 2001 technology. So I had to buy a disc burner for my new computer because they don't even have CD discs in your computer anymore to pull these photos. But these were photos that were taken and eventually scanned onto the computer by people working down there. There's no guts, there's no gore, but we'll tell. Listen, if anybody's in the chat that may be triggered, I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm not just going to start throwing up pictures because people do have PTSD from being down there and do avoid this time of year. So, but yeah. So then we're on standby, right? We're just nobody really knows what to do. There was really nothing going on locally, crime wise and response wise. And then the second tower goes down and you're like walking in a circle. You're in a fog. It's like, I gotta be able, I need to do something, right? That's what we do. We're first responders and we need to do something. We need to help people. And how can we help? But we're in a paramilitary organization. You can't just all run down there. And then all of a sudden, you see people just walking up Flatbush Avenue. Because if you know where the 7-8 precinct is, it's on 6th Avenue, just off of Flatbush Avenue, like right on the corner. And, not even, it's a quarter of a block in. And everybody was evacuating by foot over the Brooklyn Bridge, over the Manhattan Bridge, and then just walking up Flatbush because you couldn't get on. The subway systems were down. Everything was just frozen in time. And we just remember we were all like standing outside. There was no traffic. There was no cars. It was eerie silence. And just people walking up Flatbush Avenue, some covered in soot, other people just blank stare. Yeah, I can't imagine the horror that they witnessed. And then I remember that hearing the fighter jet come over, it was a little later on, but hearing that fighter jet, because there was no planes in the air. All air traffic was grounded. It was a ground halt. And all planes throughout, the country were ordered to land. And then all of a sudden you hear the fighter jet come over, and you see it. And just the realization at that point of where we're at. We're under attack. Our country's under attack. And it was just crazy. And think about this. We talk about, and we're gonna memorialize all the heroes that, the hero first responders, but they weren't the only heroes. 16,000 people were evacuated from the Twin Towers that day. Those are 16,000 lives that were saved prior to the loss of all the lives. And there's a million stories. You hear them. I watched a lot of documentaries on it, and you hear the stories of the few that survived from above the crash impact levels. And then you hear the tale of the 2 fighter pilots, right, that went up. And what was their mission?
Yeah, shoot down any other planes.
They may have to, for the first time ever, shoot down an American commercial airline. And then you had the first jets that went up weren't armed with any weapons. And what did they say? They discussed a suicide mission, that they were going to have to ram a commercial jet if they had to. And they were willing to do that. So God bless those service members that were willing to do that. But so yeah, and that day didn't end, and we were busy on Flatbush Avenue, just basically helping people, guide them, direct them to keep moving. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, no, a big concern was I'm sure it was in every borough, was, at that point was station house security too, because
Yeah.
you didn't know what additional second attack was going to be. Were they going to look to get the first responders, somewhere else, pull resources down there and then do a third or second attack somewhere else. And like you said, they had taken shut off the transponders on those airplanes. So it was basically untrackable at that point. They weren't able to communicate with them. And so, like you said, that's where the military probably had to, make that determination of whether or not a commercial aircraft didn't communicate back with them, whether they would have to either ram it or shoot it down, craziness. But yeah, I mean, you talk about, people self-evacuating, right, across to Jersey and to Hoboken. A lot of the ferries helped take people across. You
Tugboats,
know,
everything, every vessel.
every vessel, and walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, self-evacuating, and even that night, I remember some cops coming back to the borough and literally white footprints where they marched back to take a shower and stuff. They were just, full of the dust that's all the concrete dust and everything else that came down. So
Yeah,
terrible.
we'll mention that in a little bit once we get down to the rescue recovery part, because that's something that's just so vivid in my mind. But like Chronicle of the Collapse says, you know, his hospital was on standby and nobody ever arrived. And I remember hearing those stories and hearing the doctors and the nurses and seeing the news reports of the emergency rooms set up with gurneys outside the emergency room waiting for the mass casualties that were expected to come in from this tragedy. And it didn't happen because when those towers came down, that was that. And, Hunter is saying, I worked 9/11. Remember calling my mom and girlfriend that the chief wants us to send us in to help. And they were both crying. Yeah, because it was so uncertain, right? And then once this went full fledged on day one on 9/11, you couldn't get through on the cell phones. You couldn't get through even on landlines a lot of time. So all of our family members were that way. And I remember my parents were in North Carolina, and my mom had called my wife and said, what's going on? And she said, Ron went back to work. So she in her mind is calculating, he went back to work, he got dressed, he went down there, the towers went down. Oh my God. And she's sitting there and she's redial for hours and hours until she finally got through. And I had been able to get through to my wife and let her know that I was okay and I hadn't gone down. So, but yeah, all of our families were in limbo, didn't know what was going on. Just yeah, I mean, it's tough to talk about. It really is. It's public, but yet it's so personal. So just the memories of that day and everything else. But we're here today. We want to memorialize. We have the motto in the NYPD: never forget. We wanted to make sure that we don't forget. That day, there was a total of 2,977 people that died. Right, that's not including the 19 hijackers. 2,753 were in New York City at the World Trade Center site. That included 343 firefighters from the FDNY, 37 Port Authority police officers, 23 NYPD, 3 New York State court officers, 1 Secret Service special officer, and 1 FBI agent. You know, let's not forget 184 people at the Pentagon, 40 people on that fateful flight that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in the field. Talk about heroes once again. That how many lives did they save that they gave their own, overtaking that cockpit and bringing that plane down in that field. You know, it was an attack on this country, but there were citizens from 78 countries that died that day.
And it hasn't stopped, right? So that the diseases and everything else and all the cancers and everything else from all the people that responded down there. I think a lot of people that were at the in Staten Island at the temporary morgue and sifting through all that dust and everything else, a lot of them. So it still to this day contributes to the death toll and the number from the attacks that day.
Yeah. All right. You want to get into that? Okay. So the New York Post put out an article this week, and staggering numbers, right? Nearly 50,000 people, just under 50,000 people, have 9/11 linked cancers. And I'm going to preface the numbers that we're going to go through right now with these are the documented numbers. These are the people that signed up for the World Trade Center, health program. And it's been reported through the CDC, but not everybody has signed up for the World Trade Center health program or the Victims' Compensation Fund. So these are the documented case. And I'm sure that there are hundreds, if not thousands more of people that aren't documented through the World Trade Center program, whether they don't think they it's related, whether they don't think that they're eligible, or they just not educated to the availability. But these numbers are staggering. And I tried to find numbers, very specific numbers, and Tom mentioned it last night on his show on the 10-4 Tavern. There's not one place that really correlates all the numbers together. So when you do searches online, you get different numbers. So it's difficult, but the number of first responders and others diagnosed with 9/11 linked cancers has ballooned to just under 50,000, a staggering 143 increase in 5 years. And again, that's the data from the World Trade Center Health Program. Skin, prostate, and breast cancer top the list, along with melanoma, lymphoma, leukemia, and cancers of the thyroid, kidney, lung, bladder, believed to have been triggered by toxins at Ground Zero, Fresh Kills landfill in Staten Island. So in addition to the World Trade Center program has significantly increased its enrollment since 2017. So last year, there was a record year for the highest number of new members, more than 10,000 people. And I think that is attributed to the news media actually getting it out there, and also social media, that the federal government has extended the program, and people are available. So more than 10,000 people signed up just last year. So, but they say, the spokesman says that we will continue to see an increase in cancer and other serious conditions that have longer latency periods. The CDC counts 8,215 World Trade Center enrollees. Like I said, those are the enrollees who have died, including 5,844 responders as of March 27th of this year. Now, I don't know the definition of responders. I'm going to say that those are inclusive of anyone who came down to work in the rescue and recovery, including the iron workers who are a
And
lot of time
that's
forgotten.
also the task force, right? So there were FEMA. I mean, I think the fire department requested the FEMA to respond. So those are also, you have people that I think I'm not sure, I think it was, I don't know if it was in Texas or there was a few other from outside the state. So I think some of them are also having some of those elements too. So that's what could elevate it also. And Jersey State Police and things like that. So there was a huge mutual aid response from everybody in the tri-state area. And then, there was even volunteer firemen that were down there that could have been affected. And there was, like I said, the FEMA teams that responded too were subjected to all the toxins that were down there as well, which, like somebody said in the chat earlier, the EPA, I think it was Whitman, right? Wasn't she in charge of that from Jersey? She said the
Yeah,
air is safe. The air is safe, but
yeah, that's
obviously that was
right here.
BS right there.
Yeah, it's right
So
here. So this is a retired officer, Tarantino. He wound up with esophageal and stomach cancer, and he's talking about it. Every once in a while, you look in the bucket, talking about being on the bucket brigade. I skipped one of the things because you brought up Christy Todd Whitman, and you see a hand or other body part, and with all the dignity it deserved, we take that body part over to the medical examiner's office. And he remembers the officials insisting that the air was safe, and yeah, I was there, and she says she stood up there and said nothing was wrong with the quality of the air, which we know is a lie. Short time later, they started handing out boxes of N95 masks, which we didn't know what an N95 was until COVID, right?
well, we did in ESU, but
Oh,
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
But the masks would turn black in an hour, and
And the problem is they didn't give you new filters either.
right, right. So as of the writing of this week, 3,767 members who died, including 2,388 responders, had cancer.
Uh,
So
Terrible.
the number that have died since has eclipsed those that died that day. So like I said, I wasn't down there that first day, the 11th, and then the 12th. We were still working things out. And then on the 13th, I did go down, and like you said, I'm going to put up just a couple of quick pictures, but you can see they're grainy because again, just 2000 and 2001. This might have even been a Polaroid camera for all I know. I don't remember these pictures that were taken and how they were taken. But you could see on 9/13. And there's the sergeant in the white shirt there, right? I'm wearing my white shirt. The big guy in the middle. But you can see in the air that the dust and the particles are still, in the air. It's just pitch black. It was apocalyptic. Being down there at night for the first week or so, before they put the fences up and all the lighting, you know, just you can see those. It's not a dirty picture. Those are the pictures. So, like you said, the air was horrific, and all that went down there was subject to breathing this in. Because even with those masks, first of all, you couldn't do the work we were doing and keep the masks on. The filtered masks that the ESU had, FD had, you saw it was around everybody's necks and everything else, and you'll see it in the pictures that we're going to show. And yeah, so that's just that. So after we get put on our 12-hour tours, right? We all got put on 12-hour tours. There was an A squad and a B squad. So you worked 6 at night to 6 in the morning, I believe, or was it 8 at night to 8 in the morning? I don't even remember. And then the other tour worked the other 12 hours, and we had no days off, and that went through October. And it was just it was difficult. So what was it like for you going down and working on the pile?
Yeah, so going down, I actually went down on the 12th because that I guess the chief and them had wanted more people to go down, a little bit of a rotation and keep some people back at the borough. So I went down. I mean, it was I think it was Tom or Pete might have said yesterday, driving down the West Side Highway. Uh, well, I was in a bus or whatever. I think it was, I don't know if it was a school bus or a NYPD bus, but you're driving down there, didn't really know what to expect. You saw what you saw on TV or whatever, but it became surreal when you got down there. And you get to a certain point and there were people cheering you on, and literally, I'm a lieutenant at that time. Obviously through the rank of sergeant and police officer, never had anybody cheer for me in the police department. No civilians ever said thank you or were so happy. But you drove through that and you got down to a staging area, which was the school down there off of West Street in the back of the school, and then you got your assignment. And then we ended up, there was equipment, like there was socks, there were boots you could take if you didn't have it or whatever, because there was a lot of donations going on. I mean, you literally, people throughout the city, throughout the country, were sending things to New York City, and the water, food, everything was being brought in. So we end up getting rostered up, and I end up getting on the pile and doing the bucket brigade. And like you said, I had the mask on. You're sweating to death because you're working, and eventually the mask is falling off, and you can't even bother. You smell what's ever burning underneath you, all the toxins and everything else. Obviously, you walk through all that dust, and then you're moving these buckets in and out as guys are digging, well ahead of you. And they say, I mentioned it yesterday on 10th Avenue. They once in a while you hear the siren, and that was to get off the pile, and everybody would have to run and get off the pile, and then you'd wait, and then you'd hear the blast again. That you could go back; it was cleared or whatever. But I remember ironworkers, and God bless them, they did a phenomenal job. But I remember, there was huge pieces of steel. I can remember standing on one. I thought I was good, but I see the guy underneath me cutting it and stuff. So I was like, man, I better get off this piece of steel. This is gonna, and then you had to get off and go on another line or whatever. But yeah, it was just it was surreal. You never thought you would have saw the. I had When I was a young kid, I think 18 or so, I had gone with a group up to the World Trade Center, and we had gone up to the windows on the world, looked at the view and everything else, and that was beautiful. And now I'm looking at a building that's completely devastated, and obviously all the lives that have gone with that building. So it was definitely a surreal thing. It was, it hit you hard. And then I would always, the guys would go back and, there were people from, I think it was the Red Cross, right? That they would talk to you about stress and everything else. And I would always go in there and thank them too, because, they did a great job. They're in there trying to talk to everybody. It was like an area where you could go back and rest, but they would come up to your table and say, "Hey, how do you guys feel? Everything all right?" I mean, there was a lot of caring and what I felt love for the police department and all the first responders, and it was very very much appreciated in such a devastating time. And then subsequently the next couple of days, and then I would go back to the borough and do my work at the borough too. So that wasn't over. You had to go back and do that. And I remember managing all the stuff coming in, all the donations and everything else. And I'll talk about it later. But there was some people that donated things that they issued bills later on to the NYPD, and that was a little off the cuff. But and then again, I went down there subsequent days after doing the same thing. But the first look at that, it was an horrific a view, and no view that I think anybody should see and ever want to see again.
Yeah. I remember going down, and you didn't think of anything at the time with documentation wise, and they made it so difficult later to prove you were there so that you can get certified for being
Yeah.
there. because we had so many sergeants. I think we had 28 sergeants, and so you were basically on a 12-hour tour. Might be working for 2 hours because you were just chopping it up. Guys were out on fixed posts. A couple of cars were running. There was no crime. There's nothing going on. And so every night, two guys, the CO would allow two guys to be like, sergeants 17 and 18 on the roll call, but you could go down and work the pile. So you really weren't on the roster. You weren't on the roll call. You would just go down and get on the bucket brigade. You go down in your civilian clothes and you get on the bucket brigade. And that became a problem later on, right? Because you had to document a certain amount of hours. If you weren't there within the first 48 hours, you had to be there for a total of 48 hours. Subsequently, whether you work in a security detail or you were on the bucket brigade, you had to document it. And unlike other states, New York does not allow witness statements. And that's not credible enough when it comes to the legal part of it. But going down, I remember that. And I remember telling the story during my interview with John and Eric, and I got a little emotional. And because you're going through all of this, you're numb, you're working 12 hours on, 12 hours off. The 12 hours isn't really 12 hours because by the time you get back to the command and you change, and then you head home, and then you have to get a shower, get a little sleep, get back up, get back into work. You're not spending any time with your family either. So you're like in this zone and you're in the van and you're heading in and you're coming up through that tunnel onto West Street. And everybody was there from all around the country and they were cheering you on and clapping for you. And I don't think I ever came through there without being emotional. And it was very difficult, but it meant so much. It meant so much to us that people cared. You saw buses from all over the country. They had the states next to, a poster of the state of where they were from. They were lined up over there. And then you had the tractor trailers over in downtown across the other side of the West Side Highway. And that's where all the donations were coming in. And they eventually set up massage trailers where you can go in and they would give massages. And in the Marriott Hotel they had recliner chairs for you to take a little break on, and you could talk to somebody from the Red Cross like you said, or go in there. But working on the pile, and I'm getting far behind on the comments, so because I'm trying to think, but working on the pile and my experience on the pile was difficult because, like you said, you'd hear the horns, the siren would go off, everybody would have to leave because they thought that the other buildings were going to go down. They had the laser up there. If they felt that it moved the slightest bit, they hit the siren and we would all get chased off the pile, right? And then the other thing that was really eerie, because listen, we were there for over a week before we started losing hope. For that first week, we were working feverishly, digging, hoping to find a void somewhere, hoping to find that under that pile of twisted everything, that we were going to find a void where some people survived. And
don't forget though that ESU did find two PAPD guys. So
actually, that Marine that suited up,
right? He found them first.
He found them and went and got help, right? And then Port Authority Police, FDNY, ESU, they all wound up cutting those two out. They talked about that yesterday because they had the detective McQuaid on yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it was really two ESU guys that were down in the hole there with them. But.
Right. And so that was some story. But yeah. But remember when it would like come as a riffle for silence because somebody thought they heard something. Somebody thought they heard banging or whatever the case may be. and then it would be like shh, 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 as you're going down the entire pile because there's no real communications, right?
No.
And then finally, there's silence, and you're hoping to hear some type of positive outcome, which never happened. And then there was the other times where you would hear a gunshot every now and then, right? Because the members that were crushed in these piles, their guns with the fires that were burning and everything else, the ammunition would go off. The smell, you'll never forget that smell.
That's horrible smell.
But one thing that, still to this day amazes me is you have 110 stories times two, right? It's 110 stories times two of offices, restaurants, stores, zero office furniture, equipment, no desks, no chairs, nothing. Everything just eviscerated, just
Vaporized. Yep.
vaporized. Uh, Papers floating down for days, still in the air, not thinking of anything, walking by, seeing little charred pieces of paper, just walking past them as if it's nothing. And that's the last thing that somebody was touching before they lost their life, before this tragic event. Volunteers from all around the country, like I said, coming, bringing food, bringing supplies to help us out. The service dogs from all over the nation, the canines that had to wear booties because their paws were getting chewed up, the cadaver dogs, right? Just everything. Just everything. It's just so it was tough. And
No, it was really tough when they put out the list, the names, when they said these are the MOSs that are missing. And
right.
then it became that when it really became something like you said, oh my God, that you know what that this is surreal now because I listen is I don't want to I'm not trying to sound bad, but understandably with a building collapse like that, you anticipate there's going to be deaths because of the height of the building and the pancake collapse that continues as the building goes down. So yes, there could be voids and everything else, but when that happens, the chance of survival, especially because of the height of that building, is minimal. But then you say, okay, well, the first responders, most of the lobbies, FDNY usually sets up their incident command post right inside the lobby because they have a fire panel. They're able to see where the fire is, activation of particular sprinklers, ventilation system. So that's where they set up their incident command post. But now, when the building that you're in collapses, you lose everything. So all your first responders and everything else. And I remember seeing the names, and you were praying that okay, that there's recovery or they got out or maybe they're in a hospital or somewhere else. But devastating for the guys and gals that went in there and made those initial rescues and weren't able to make it out, you know. Very sad.
Yeah. All right. We're 55 minutes in. Um, let's not forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Get the algorithm going a little bit. We have 358 people in watching us right now. So let's share this out. Let's get the algorithm going. Trying to catch up on the chat as you're talking. So yeah, it's just it was something. We talk about it, right? We talk about how the country united and the country came together.
New York, you're right. New York was crazy. I remember driving home one time in New York, and I had to get onto the Cross Bronx, and people let me in. I said, "This what's going on here?" There was such unity throughout the city, but yeah, definitely throughout the country, right? I mean, everybody felt it.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. And on that day, just to go back, calling everybody in and everything else. There was some comments in the comments about people that became ill, got some illnesses or sicknesses, didn't want to come to work, didn't answer their phone, didn't respond to every news and radio report saying that everybody's to report into work. I had that experience as well when I was calling everybody in. I had one officer that made it in 5 hours, or less. No, I'm sorry, I forget how many. He was in Quantico, Virginia, and he was doing his weekend drill, or he was doing his week with the reserves. And he got in the car. He said there was nobody on the road. All the way from Virginia to New York. He got stopped quite a few times along the way. NYPD, go. And zoom. Then I had another officer who was in Bayonne, New Jersey. I'm not going to name him, even though I feel like it, but I'm not going to. He told me he couldn't make it in, that the bridge was closed. And I said, basically, get to that bridge, identify yourself as an NYPD member, and they're going to let you across. But he was trying to argue that he couldn't get in because he was at his girlfriend's house in Bayonne, New Jersey. So he had a nice Third Avenue post, and then wound up going injured, his back, because he was standing for too long, because of his attitude and everything else. So he didn't get, like, the other members of the command weren't as quick to go give him a relief, we'll say.
Yeah, no.
Then he wound up going limited. But then you had everybody else in the world that was out sick, that was running to their district surgeon so they can get put back to full duty so they can get in and help.
Different people, yeah. I mean, we had guys that said, like, "Oh, I can't come in. I don't. I have family and stuff." And we're like, "You have family? There's police officers and firefighters and EMTs that are missing. What about their families? What do you mean you can't come in because of your family? This is part of your job, man. As bad as it was, that's part of your job." So.
So Amazing Ann is saying, anyone remember the trailer, the morgue by Century 21? I was there when we found remains. Yeah, I do remember. And I remember working there, and we recovered the remains of a civilian, and they brought a Stokes basket over, and put the remains in the basket, and the remains were brought over to the morgue. But we don't want to get too deep into the the shape that some of these victims were in, right? So this person wasn't intact, and then not too long after, we found another part of that person, right? And so we didn't wait for the Stokes basket and the whole 9 yards. We actually put the rest of that remains, and we took it to the morgue, and we tried to hurry up because we wanted to marry it up, with the other remains, so that the family would get as much of a whole family member back. And they're like, "What are you rushing for? This is the only remains that came in all day." And I just remember how, like, deflating that was. That these were the only remains that were found in the entire day. So I remember, and this kind of bothers me to this day, but I remember going through you fill in the buckets. What do you fill in the buckets with? You fill in the buckets with the debris and the dust and the rocks and other stuff, and finding this. I don't know how else to describe it, really, like maybe like a piece of fatty tissue, and not thinking anything of it, and not turning it into the morgue, not thinking what we know today, right? Hindsight is 2020. What we know today is any piece of DNA helps to identify these people, and the smallest piece may be all that's ever going to be found. And I just pray that down the line at the the landfill on the conveyor belt or whatever, that person's remains were identified, were found.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember them. Anybody that was missing, missing persons would put a thing out for anybody that had like toothbrushes or things from somebody that they thought was missing, so they could send in the DNA so that they could actually try to match things because everything was pretty much decimated, and could only go by the minimal amount of things that you had to try to match something so you could give people closure. That they would have something to be able to pay the last respects. But I mean, somebody in the comment mentioned about people jumping. Now I didn't, obviously I didn't go down the first day, so I didn't see that. But I know guys. I know Pete had mentioned it yesterday at 10-4 Tavern. I know a sergeant that I know, a really close friend, was on his way down there, and he actually watched people making a serious decision whether or not to wait to see if they could get rescued, or maybe overcome by the smoke, or jump. And a lot of them chose to jump, which I understand totally. You're up on those upper floors, and there's no place to go. The building's filling with smoke. But yeah, I mean, that in itself is a devastating thing to watch. Even watching a regular jumper that jumps from an EDP that jumps. You gasp, you're like as they jump or whatever. And these poor people that had to make that life decision. I mean, and for the poor responders and the people that lived in that community and that were able to witness this, it was a devastating thing to see. Just the psychological effects is devastating in itself. So I mean, not only was the attack, but things that came after, right? The PTSD that we speak about, that came from hearing about it, watching it, seeing it. It was devastating for a lot of people, and I know to this day, it stays in their mind. It's very, very, very hard on them.
Absolutely. And if you remember the two French photographers that were
Yeah,
riding along with the fire chief.
Joe Pfeiffer.
Yes, Joe Pfeiffer, correct. And they were there from, they have that panned shot. They were on the scene of the manhole or whatever it was, and they heard the plane and they were able to zoom up. And that was the first time you knew it was a jetliner, right?
Right.
And then they followed them through, and they were in the command center with them. And in that video, you kept hearing the bang,
Yep.
bang. And they're like, what's that? And like, it's another jumper. You got to be, you can't walk out. You can't go out and do that, And
Yeah, no.
wasn't their department chaplain killed
He was killed. He
by a
was
jumper,
killed. Yeah.
right? He was
Uh,
the first documented responder's death on 9/11. Um, oh,
Wait, you're saying he jumped too? I don't
no, no,
know.
no, no. He was. I believe he was
Yeah.
hit by a jumper, right?
Yeah. I don't know how actually I know that was but it was the first chaplain, I think, that was actually ever killed, right? Yeah, I think amazing answer, right? It was Father
Father
Michael
Michael
Judge.
Judge, correct.
Yeah. You may be right. I don't know for a fact. I don't want
If
to.
anybody in the chat remembers, just
Yeah.
throw it in there. But um, just devastating.
Yeah.
And somebody was in the chat and they were talking about the World Trade Center and the medical benefits being taken away, diminished, that the World Trade Center doesn't want to pay for certain medications anymore, or treatments. And I, I hope that's not the case for you. I have not had that experience with the World Trade Center. I am enrolled, certified in some breathing issues, sleep apnea, and I had a little touch of skin cancer. And I cannot do anything but praise the World Trade Center Health Program. Uh, they've always been responsive. Anytime I message them or I call them, medications, I just, in the app, I just message them that I need a refill, and it comes a 90-day supply in the mail. Even over-the-counter medication that's not prescription medication that I have to take for like my chronic rhinosinusitis, no questions comes.
I
I
think
had a
Amazing Ant and Nighthawk is saying in the chat that they're getting more restrictive, and they're not authorizing.
I don't know. I've never, for every doctor's appointment, for every medication, I've had no issues. I went to Mount Sinai until I retired, and now I go to the Staten Island clinic, and they're great. They're great. I call up and I speak to them. I do my annual physical. I do my every 6 month physical. I do televisits with certain doctors. I had a televisit with a doctor today from the World Trade Center. I'm going to have a procedure tomorrow, Friday, World Trade Center. Authorization, no copayment. So I'm sorry if somebody's having those problems, but and there's a difference between the Victims Compensation Fund and the World Trade Center Health Program. The World Trade Center Health Program monitors and treats your certified illnesses and ailments. And the Victims Compensation Fund was a fund that was put together by the federal government to compensate you for any illnesses or injuries that are certified. And that fund has been extended as well. So, I'm sorry, Amazing Ant and Nighthawk, if you're having a negative, experience. I do know that the first responders are in a different program than civilians, because I know some civilians that are registered in the program, and they don't have the same experience that I have. It's a different program, and they see different doctors. But yeah. All right. So I think at this juncture, we're gonna play a video. And so if anybody in the chat suffers from PTSD, gets triggered by memories and sights of ground zero, maybe go get a cup of coffee, because we're going to play a slideshow video of the rescue and recovery efforts down on the pile. Anything you want to say before we go to that, Rob?
No.
So. All right. So
I really, I really think you have to give. I mean, it's devastating, right? To even watch that, just it brings back horrific memories. But I have to give kudos to the steel workers with the precision and expertise that they did. You know, lifting up girders, all that steel, and moving it and taking it wherever it had to be taken, so that they could sift through it or look through it. But while people were working and while people were still there, they had these guys picking up with cranes, making sure nobody was hurt, moving them out, and not to disturb the crime scene, right? So, I mean, an amazing work by those by the steel workers, who I think don't get enough recognition for all the things that they did down there. I mean, they were responsible for the I mean, obviously we did the rescue and the recovery. They were responsible for the restoration of that whole area by getting everything out of there. So I think they deserve definitely a pat on the back for the great job that they did, and they're suffering too from some of the 9/11 related injuries too. So
oh, absolutely. And I mentioned them in the beginning because I couldn't agree with you anymore. That they are, without a doubt, part of the history of the rescue and recovery because they also, without them, we weren't recovering any of our members, any of the civilians that were recovered, any of the firefighters that were recovered. Um, you know, because they had to cut through that steel, remove the steel in order to get to um, when they did find someone. And that was another thing. You'd be working, and then somebody would be found, and then they would call in any of the any of the um, remaining members of the fire department company or the precinct or whatever the case may be to walk them out
right.
once they did recover them, and then we would all stop on the pile and then do a salute as they carry them out under an American flag.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
remember
and the
with
American flag,
Espo, right? I would
yeah,
always walk out when a member of the service from the NYPD. Espo was always there.
absolutely. And
What were you saying? The American
wait, I
flag?
don't think we're up. Hold on, I'm looking over. Oh no, my phone was delayed, was behind. I thought the video was still shown on the screen. I was confused with the confliction there. But yeah, and the eerie thing, always remembering the Stokes basket that was carried out. The flag always laid, into the basket just because of the fact of how bad uh, it was. Yeah, and QC Beast is saying that Ray Kelly came
Yeah.
down. He walked out Sergeant Mike Curtin when he was found because he was an ex-Marine, and we know, well, former Marine, and
Never a former Marine.
no, never an ex-Marine. You're a former
Is it?
Marine, I
Oh, all
believe.
right.
Uh, and then and Ray Kelly was a Marine also. So yeah, I mean these are difficult things, and you have to remember too. Now we have an entire generation. It's an entire generation later. Um, and there are cops on this job that weren't alive on 9/11. Think about that. We're getting old.
Hey, easy, big guy.
But you think about it. There are cops on this job that the only thing they know about 9/11 is what they're told by other members of the service. That's why we can't forget. That's why we need things like this podcast, the 10-4 Tavern yesterday, um, to memorialize what happened that day. Because they're not even teaching it in the schools the way they should. When you talk about American history, what are they teaching these kids today?
Not
You know,
much.
I mean, my kid's school is having a remembrance It's a private school. But I asked my daughter, what did they teach you about, 9/11? Really, it's amazing that they're
Yeah.
not teaching this
It
because
doesn't serve their agenda.
if you don't teach people about the past, it's bound to repeat itself, right? And we see
Yes.
that now. And again, we go back to how united the country was. And Pete said this yesterday on his show, and it stuck with me that I don't think the country in our lifetime has ever been ever so united since September 12th was the most that we've seen it in our lifetime united. I'm talking our lifetime. There might be our elders, our parents that remember the war and maybe after. But now, where are we now? Probably the most divided. Again, go back to Charlie Kirk and what happened today. Political assassination of Charlie Kirk because he's a conservative speaker. And he goes out and speaks about his conservative principles and speaks about God and country and the Bible, but also doesn't disrespect anybody else that has an opposing view. He'll counter with his views and his opinions and his facts, but politics has divided this country so bad. I don't know that we'll ever see that unification the way we did after 9/11.
That's why when I first became a captain in ESU, walking up the stairs of truck 3, and I saw the 3 lockers, the 3 police officers that were killed in 9/11 that were assigned to truck 3, that their lockers represent something totally different. It personalizes things as opposed to a plaque. You could see a plaque and that's fine, and you may read it. But when you're walking up and you see, Wally Weaver's locker, I mean, it becomes more personal because that makes an understanding that there was an individual that opened that locker every day, put on a uniform to do their job, and I think that is a good thing that ESU continues to do, to have that there. So when, like you just said, when there's new cops assigned to ESU and they come into one of the trucks where, unfortunately, 14 members of ESU were killed, that they're able to see that locker, and it brings a little bit more of a personal um, understanding, to that particular that officer. It brings a more light to it rather than just looking up at a plaque. I mean, we all have plaques. When you walk into 1PP, there's a huge plaque up on the wall of all the deceased members of service killed in the line of duty. And you may, gander at it, take a look. But when you see a locker or something that belonged to somebody, still in the same shape and same stickers and everything else that are on it, when that person actually, went down to save people on 9/11, it means a totally different thing. So
100%. Here's Stephen Driscoll and John Coughlin's memorials at that's truck 4, right?
yeah,
So yeah, like you said, you see these when you come in, and they're memorialized, and a lot of times people walk right past them.
right. You may read it once or twice, but
Right, but
you're not seeing it every. I think a locker is much more personal. Yeah, right. Your locker next when you changed, that was your locker. That was your personal stuff. Whatever you had in there, that belonged to you, and that was not changed at all. They literally took those lockers and put it in a spot where it was not in the locker room anymore. It was in the stairwell. So when you came up and you saw that, you knew that you knew that person right there.
yeah, and for those non-NYPD, um, that's almost like a tradition of memorializing the lockers of members that have passed. I mean, you'll have the delegates or the person's partner go through for any personal effects that the family should have out of that locker. But then the locker is memorialized. It becomes, like you said, it becomes a living memorial, kept intact. This is how the person dressed this day, right? Standing here in these 2 footprints in front of this locker. They changed their pants. They changed their shirt. They got on. They went out the door, not knowing what they were going to walk into. So yeah, that's and you know, we lost 23 members that day. And again, very difficult to find online. We lost 23 members on that day, and at the end of the show, because on September 11th, every year, they have a roll call of the 23 lost. I always made it a point to go in and do that roll call at my commands when I was an executive. It meant a lot to me to be involved in it, to keep that memory alive, to make sure that it was not half-assed done. And we're going to have, you know, an executive perspective version of that role at the end of the show today. But looking online, it was very difficult to find the exact numbers. I reached out to a very high-ranking member of the police department to try and get the number of how many NYPD members of the service have passed from 9/11 illnesses that they contracted while working rescue and recovery at Ground Zero or the landfill or the morgue. And they couldn't give me the answer. They said it's a pension answer, and nobody at pension can give me the answer as to who's been officially designated as a 9/11 death. There was the number, the only number I could find online was as of September of last year, and it was over 400. Over 400 NYPD members have passed since 9/11 from illnesses contracted working the recovery, rescue and recovery. And it's not getting better. We see it constantly. And I have to say this, I don't know if that number includes anybody that might have taken their life because of PTSD or any kind of psychological issues that they've had dealing with having been down there, witnessing what they witnessed. So same thing with the fire department. They lost 343 members in the line of duty on 9/11, FDNY. And they're over 400 members also have passed of 9/11 related illnesses. So it's the gift that keeps on giving from these.
I remember, I think it might have been the 10th anniversary. I'm not sure. The NYPD put out a huge poster of the faces of all the members of the service that subsequently died after after 9/11 from the toxins or whatever from the cancers. I thought that was appropriate. So we spoke about it earlier and say the NYPD never forgets and stuff, but here's a prime example of what I would say is this is a number that they should have automatically, like everybody should have, and it should be public. It should be continually pressed out. The news media should have it. I don't think it's fair that to the people that die later on that they not remembered, because to me our responsibility with the police department is to never forget. That was the term that it started, and that's what the term that continues today. So they need to show it a little bit. I just think they kind of dropped the ball a little bit when they say we don't know, if it's designated a line of duty. All right, well, tell us how many were designated line of duty injuries from 9/11 and give us the appropriate number. And that should be public record. That should be to everybody that retires and everything else, because there's guys that I may have not known the any of the 23 that died that day. I met the families of the 14 members from ESU at the subsequent 9/11 ceremonies, as you would call it, where they would read the names. Like I worked every one of them, and I was proud to be down there and be able to represent ESU. I was able to speak to the family and understand the devastation that they went through, and the continual a reminder, right, every year that they come down. And I know it's a bit of a relief for them, and we're able to give them our sympathy and stuff and understanding. But I lost a really close friend, Steve Bonanno, to 9/11 cancer. Carlos Ocasio, who was a great guy that worked in the chief of patrol's office when Estevillo was there. Another great guy. I lost a lot of friends afterwards, and I don't think it's fair that they don't continually update that. They have my email. The CEA has my email. I think the department should send it out. This is a list of the members of the service who have passed away from 9/11 cancer. These are the ones that have designated line of duty injuries. Give us that information so that I can understand. I mean, like last time, I think you had shown a video, and there were people on, like Wandy Negron, who I worked with when she was in domestic violence. I said I didn't even notice that she had passed from 9/11 cancer. So I just think that maybe they don't forget about the members of service that passed, but they forget about the retirees and the people on the job that knew these people. So I think they should do a little more. They could step up a little bit and show a little more, not just have everybody down there at ground zero at the Freedom Tower and read the names. Maybe not everybody can make it there, but give us updates. I mean, it's no sweat off their back at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And though it started out with the one poster board and it wound up being 3, but I don't believe they continued on.
No.
So I don't know. If anybody in the chat, message us tomorrow if you happen to stand the roll call, and let us know if they're put out. Because I remember I used to have to put them out on an easel, and I would put them out behind me as I stood at the podium to call off the roll call and to read, the finest message that comes down. It talks about, at this time, 24 years ago, the tower fell, and you go through it. And then you read the roll call of the 23 members that we lost that day. And then you say, and we also remember those that we have lost to illnesses while working in the rescue and recovery. So I don't know. I couldn't get a number. And online, the NYPD memorial isn't up to date. It has a list. It has a list of members that have died, but it doesn't. It's not up to date.
Yeah, no. Louis Fernandez, who was a huge player when you have to climb the Brooklyn Bridge, right? He was from Truck 6. He was always like one of the guys that would make sure you're all right. He actually, unfortunately for me, and his family, obviously, he died. I was at his bed when he passed away. It was devastating from 9/11 cancer. And it just, those are the names you don't hear, the people that don't pass. Now ESU did a splendid job of recognizing him. If you're ever able to, anybody young guys in the chat, young girls in the chat, if you're able to climb the Verrazano Bridge, you'll see a plaque all the way up on the top, because he would always love to climb it when they did the training and stuff. So I mean, that's what I'm talking about. That's where there needs to be a little bit more. I know Eddie Lutz mentioned in the chat that FD was always on top of taking care of the members and made sure proper recognition was always shown. The NYPD not too good, and I 100%. I mean, and why not? why wouldn't they be, right? I mean, that's their motto, never forget. So
I agree. And like I said, I called the location in the NYPD where I thought that I would be able to get that information. And this chief told me that he has had that question several times, and it has to be referred to pension because they're the only ones that could designate it a line of duty death, because you have to be registered with the pension, and people don't
right,
realize that. That's where your memo books and the copies of your memo books, the copies of the rosters, the copies of your overtime slips, whatever else you could muster together, pictures of yourself down there, whatever the case may be, you had to make sure that it was scanned in at the pension section, because you have to make sure that you can, secure the proper pension for your family. God forbid you contract an illness and pass away, because you can retroactively be designated a line of duty death and your
right.
family can get those benefits. But you have to be properly registered with that. I just got a text message that
Yeah, I saw it.
yeah, that they have a second person in custody in the Charlie Kirk incident that they believe is the shooter that was on top of a roof. They got him from campus security. I guess we'll follow up on that once we get off.
No, I mean, I agree that, they could definitely do a little bit more. And people had to go through hoops to get information. I remember blast emails. Hey, does anybody remember seeing me down at ground zero? And then you would have to sign a testimonial piece of paper that, yes, I witnessed, Rob Lukach down at ground zero on such and such a time. I mean, and, luckily, one of the sergeants in the borough, one of my sergeants, Eddie Gibbs, since retired, great guy, he had a lot of paperwork, and he was an attorney, right? So he saved a lot of the paperwork. So when guys later on would ask, information, he would give it to them. And in fact, he even sent it to my wife at the time and say, here's your documentation that you may or may not have it, because not everybody was writing their memo books and stuff. So,
Yeah,
it was
I was
crazy.
I was fortunate because I actually in my memo book did write that I was at ground zero on a certain amount of days that I went down there. And so that was documented. The sergeant I always went with, we shared a squad together. So we always went down together. He didn't do that. So I had to write a letter for him. And then now you
Right.
find out that that's not acceptable. It's acceptable for the World Trade Center health program and for the Victims Compensation Fund, but not for your pension.
Mm.
A letter of somebody verifying that you were there with them is not acceptable proof to the police pension fund. So, yeah, PB is saying the site was always shut down at lunch the day before for 9/11, but in 2001 it was pure Hollywood. Anderson Cooper, that midget, was in the deli waiting for Obama to show up. I actually, at the memorial, was able to get tickets for that day. And that was my first time there. And have you ever been down to the memorial
Yeah.
and gone into the museum?
Yep.
Very.
I can tell you a story about that real quick, but
Yeah,
some
no.
of some of the this is what I was told. Kelly, who I had the utmost respect for as a police commissioner, refused to release some of the damaged vehicles and equipment that was done to the NYPD vehicles. That's why if you see that ladder truck from the fire department and the devastation that the collapse occurred, and there's only like a door from one of the RMPs, the radio motor patrol cars or police cars. There's a limited amount of stuff that we put down there. And I don't know why he did that. Like, I think there should have been more stuff from the NYPD. There could have been in one of the emergency service vehicles that was devastated. It could have been put down there. I don't know why he did that. But yeah, I've been down there, and it's heart wrenching when you walk through there, because I think it's is it Morris Smith's shield down there? You see that, you see certain things that are just, it pulls things again, like the issue does with the lockers. It personalizes things. It's no
Yeah.
longer I see a picture and I know that Morris Smith was down there, or 14 guys from ESU, nine other members of the service. But now you're seeing that there's personal effects of these individuals down there. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was I didn't even get through because they actually had two events that day, so we had to leave. Um, but I was there when the dignitaries were there, and then I was walking through, and it was a lot to take in.
Hmm.
It was a lot to take in, and you know, I didn't even, to be honest with you, I've never gone back. I've been to the memorial. I've brought family members to the memorial upstairs.
You
Uh,
mean to the pools, the
the pool,
reflecting
yeah,
pools?
the
Yeah,
reflection pool. But I've
yeah.
never gone back into the memorial. Uh,
The
so
only time I did is I took my two sons down there. I wanted them to, 'cause, they're, obviously questions and everything else. So I say, you want to see what, happened? They were both, I think they were 6 and 4 at the time. So I said, I'm going to take you down there and so you can understand exactly what happened. So, but yeah, after that, I didn't feel, uh, I didn't want to go back down. It was enough. The girder there with the the numbers 37, 23, 343. I mean, all of those things. It, you know,
yeah,
it's heart wrenching when you see it in person. That's the you could see it on TV, you could see it on pictures, but when you visualize in person, then you think about all the families, right, that have gone through this devastation for the last 24 years. Their children's children have grown up, right? I mean, it's just it's a lot. It's a lot for these families, and God bless them all.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Anything else you want to touch on?
Let's see. I mean, I think we hit on everything. It was just, it was definitely a catastrophic event that you never want anybody to see or hear. It's bad all around. But and remind everybody that there's services out there, right? So if you feel, I mean, obviously the first time I went for the World Trade Center screening and stuff, they start asking all the questions about your physical health and any disabilities that you feel, and then they start talking about your psychological. So the first time you do it, you're like, why are they asking me if I feel okay or I have suicidal thoughts? But then I think as life goes on, you kind of you can understand it because I think it affects you more and more. And I think what the best thing to do is the resources. Use every resource that you have and talk to people about it. Talk to with your family members. Talk to anybody that you can. Call old friends. It's a bad thing, but you can reminisce about it. And I think when you verbalize things and put it out, it'll make you feel better than holding it in. Don't be that stone cold cop where you have to not say anything. You got to hold everything in. Now's the time where you got to talk about it and bring it out. And I think that's the most important thing is your mental and physical health right now. So
Absolutely. You know, you know, it, it's an expression, and Pete on the 10-4 Tavern says it all the time because he's suffered with it through the years. He's got a harrowing experience. Go back and watch that episode from last night from the 10-4 Tavern on their 9/11 remembrance and their experiences from that day. And Pete Faselli was there. He explained, the loss of close friends, of people he was working with, having to dive under a fire truck when the building went down, and it's really really moving things. But one of the things he always says it's okay not to be okay. Yeah, so don't think it's not okay. It's okay to not be okay. Just reach out. reach out and get that help. So I think that's it's difficult. I don't even know if we got to what we wanted to get to because it's a difficult conversation to have. It's very personal. Um, we have our personal feelings and thoughts and memories that we're trying to project. And I'm sure as soon as we go off the air, I'm going to say, I forgot to mention this. I forgot to mention that. And I wanted to bring other things up. I don't want to forget anybody, so I don't want to mention anybody's names. But I do remember, hold close to my heart, my friends that I have lost throughout the years from this 9/11 diseases. And again, so I don't forget anyone. I don't want to mention, because I just don't want to. I inevitably will forget to mention somebody and feel horrible.
Right.
So I'd rather just say that, God bless all of our members that have passed. God bless their families for carrying on their legacies, their members in their commands that carry on their legacies. Now, like you said, and like we brought up before, their children, a lot of which have come on the job and are carrying on their memories. So I want to say that we're going to play out. I
just want one thing. I just want to bring a little fun into it. So listen, I total respect for the fire department. I worked wholeheartedly with them. I've been on FEMA deployments with them, but I'm 343 souls that were lost that day, obviously, devastating to that department. But the American flag was raised first by two ESU cops. All right. I believe it was Richie Hardigan and Richie Miller. They were the one that decided to put that flag up. And that was the first representation of, hey, this is America and we will survive. We will get through that. Richie Hardigan, a former Marine, Richie Hardigan, a excellent delegate for the DEA. They put the flag up. Now the flag that was raised by the fire department, God bless them, but I think they also got a bunch of media and photographers there while they were doing it. But hey, I'm just giving ESU their due. They did it first. That's all I know, man. That they did it first. And what the fire department still to this day probably gets credit for, it was done by emergency service members. So that's what I'm telling you. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. My heart goes out to everyone, whether it was down at Ground Zero, whether it was in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, whether it was in Pennsylvania, and subsequent to all the first responders that had, subsequently died as a result of this devastating attack. My heart goes out to you. Prayers every day. And we, especially on the Finest Unfiltered, will never forget.
Absolutely. Absolutely never forget. Do you want to do a Ask an Executive segment?
I don't, John. I mean, we could do one or two. I don't know. I think we covered everything. I think this is pretty good, right?
All right, that's fine. So I'm gonna play the roll call of the 23 members that we lost, and then since we now have close to 500 viewers, I'll play the intro video as we go out also. So before we end with the memory of our 23 fallen brothers and sister, I want to say that tomorrow there will be no Sal Greco show in remembrance of 9/11. He will be on the round table with Eric and John on Friday. And then on Monday, 0805, the Finest Unfiltered will be back with their regular programming. And then on Tuesday, Sal Greco will be back at 1:05 p.m., followed by 7:05 p.m., the 10-4 Tavern. with Tom Joyce and Peter Faselli. And tonight, look out on X. The Finest Unfiltered may be going live to the host of the shows may be going live to speak about the Charlie Kirk incident. So look out for that on the Finest Unfiltered on X, and on John McCarry's X. He usually leads it out on his X. And I'm not sure if we can link up with our X. But you can follow us on X at exec perspective. So shoot over to X, give us a follow at exec perspective. If you have any questions for the Ask an Executive segment that we normally do, that we're going to skip for tonight, you could message us. It's open to everybody to message us at exec perspective, or you could email us at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com. So if you have any questions that you want to ask to executives that you never had any kind of access to, we will bring up those questions. So Chronicles is saying, if you guys are in the X space, it will show your followers you are a speaker or a listener.
That's true. Yeah.
So that's just be careful, I guess, for the active members. But you can listen anonymously. When you join the X space, you can listen anonymously so that you're listening, but your handle will not show in the list of listeners. So you can do that when you log in if you don't want to interact. Also, when we do these live spaces, you can ask for a microphone and get involved and ask a question. Lily's asking if we're doing it from John's page. John usually will put it up on his page, and we piggyback off of that. I'm not 100% right, but you can't speak exactly. And again, we don't know that we're 100% going to do it. They're just talking about it as we're live on the show. So just keep an eye out for that. And so with that said, I'm going to close tonight. We're going to close tonight with the video roll call of the 23 Lost. And then I will put up the intro that we played in the very beginning of the show to close out the show. So thanks for watching. Anything, John? Rob? Anything, Rob?
No, thanks everybody. Have a great night, and stay safe out there. And tomorrow, a day of remembrance.
Absolutely.